Hello, everybody. Welcome to our second info session. I'll just let everyone join the room. We'll get started in a second. My name's Laura El-Kaslasi. I am the Director of Adroit Business Solutions and Co-Director of Think Big Financial Group. We also have Michael Samu on the chat with us as well here. He's the Managing Director of Think Big Financial Group and Tax Agent. We also have Delaney, who is the head of the bookkeeping team as well. Today, we will be talking about director IDs. And I know that this is absolutely something that a lot of you want to know more about, which is fantastic. I'm going to share my screen and we're going to jump in. All right, just confirming you can see my screen. A yes in the chat, thumbs up, cool. All right, so we're talking about director IDs today. And what we're going to start with is, what is a director ID? It's a director identification number. It is a unique identifier, so it's got 15 digits that's given to a director, so someone who intends to become a director, and they have verified their identity with the Australian Business Registry Services. Once you do this, it is kept with you forever. So it's a one-time thing. Let's start with why this is required. So to date, this hasn't been a thing, but it is now. And the reason being is that it is going to provide a more effective way of tracking directors and their corporate history. At the moment, you can be a director of multiple companies, and I'll actually flick over to Michael in a second to talk more about the last point. But the idea of bringing this in is to provide traceability of the director across multiple companies. It reduces the use of fictitious identities. Yes, it does happen. It also improves the data integrity and security, as well as mitigating illegal Phoenix activity. So Michael, did you want to talk to that for a second?
Yeah, sure. So Phoenix legislation came in a few years back, which is essentially stopping people from starting up companies, running them into ground, bringing, or accruing a lot of creditors. So ultimately, companies are there to protect the owners and going into business by giving you the corporate veil. But if it's incorrectly or misused, people could use it to their advantage by, insolvent trading, running into the ground, having a lot of creditors, shutting the company down, or just letting it go, and then ASIC deregisters the company automatically, and then starting a fresh company, which is, Phoenix rising from the ashes. And the government has been struggling with that, in the sense that if you appoint yourself as a director of multiple entities, there's no way of really tracking that in a timely manner. So by having a director ID now, they can literally track exactly where you're going and what you're doing, which is going to obviously, save billions in the economy moving forward. Well, that's the idea anyway.
Great, thank you for that. Now let's move on to the next part, which is who actually needs a director ID. And that is if you're an eligible officer of a company, a registered Australian body, or a registered foreign company under the Corporations Act. So this is not relating, we'll go into what it's not relating to in a minute. And what that means is that an eligible officer is a person who is appointed as a director or an alternate director who is acting in that capacity. Michael, did you want to talk to what an alternate director is for people?
Yeah, an alternate director is someone essentially working as an alternative to an appointed director and working in the capacity like a director or like a shadow director. So you may not necessarily be formally appointed per se, but you are potentially going to act in that capacity or be perceived to act in that capacity. So there is a formal registration of being a director, but there's also alternate and shadow directors as well.
Perfect. And so if you are acting in either capacity, whether as a director or the alternate director, you will need a director ID, but you'll only need one. So let's talk quickly about who doesn't need a director ID. So if you're a company secretary, but not a director, then you don't need a director ID. If you're acting as an external administrator of a company, if you're running a business as a sole trader or a partnership, if you're referred to as a director in your job title, but you've not officially been appointed as a director under the Corporations Act, you're a director of a registered charity or an officer of an unincorporated association, cooperative or incorporated association, unless it's also a registered Australian body. So there's a number of people that would fall into these categories. You do not need to register for a director ID, but if you are a director or an alternate director, you do. Now, the million-dollar question is, when do you need to apply for one? So if you became or become, well, let's go in the past. If you became a director on or before the 31st of October 2021, you must apply for a director ID by November this year. So there's a bit of leeway in terms of if you're already a director before this date, you have until November this year. If you became a director anywhere between the 1st of November 2021 to the 4th of April this year, you must have a director ID within 28 days of this appointment. And then from the 5th of April, you need to have a director ID before you can be a director in a company.
Can also just say that don't be misled by this either, because if you are already a director of a previous company, it doesn't mean that you don't need to apply for one. You still must apply for one by November 2022. And even if you are appointed as a director of a new company, moving forward, you must do it within the 28 days or before appointment, depending on whether it's between November and April or past the 5th of April. So just because you are already a director of another company, you still need to apply for one if you're appointing yourself in a new company, even though you've been previously director or are an existing director of another company.
Yeah, that's a really good point. So you do need to make sure that just because you are a director, that you're not ignoring this director ID component for any new companies that are established. All right, let's talk about meeting these obligations. So the way that you can meet these obligations is by applying for the director ID on time, based on what we just shared in the previous slide. Applying for the director ID when directed by the registrar to do it. If you need to not apply for more than one director ID, because you might break the system, first of all, but it defeats the whole purpose. And you must not be misrepresenting your director ID. So the information given at the time of the director ID must be correct and true, and you must not be involved in a breach of the above ID obligations. There is an option to request an extension if you have extenuating circumstances that mean you can't actually apply for the director ID before these dates. There is plenty of time if you have established companies and you're a director of, you have until November. It's more, I guess, urgent if you are setting up a new company. All right, am I required to provide my director ID to ASIC? No, is the short answer. At the moment, there isn't a requirement to do so. The reason being is that ASIC isn't yet set up to accept this information, and ASIC Companies Register will be transferred to the ARBS. So that's the body in which you are verifying your identity to get this director ID. And that's expected in late 2023. So at this point in time, you need to have a director ID. You don't necessarily need to give it to anybody. We do recommend providing it to your accountant and anyone helping you with that side of your business, just so that if it gets lost or there's help that's required, then that can happen. All right, so what are the penalties? And I don't want this to scare anyone, but we do need to let you know that there are penalties if this doesn't happen. So if there is a failure to apply for the director ID, then there is a $13,200 maximum penalty, and it's a criminal penalty, or over $1 million for civil. If you apply for multiple, and again, we need to take the stance that if you're doing it on purpose, not if you accidentally apply for multiple director IDs, they're not going to come and slam you with these penalties. But it's important to know that if you apply for multiple director IDs, then there is a $26,640 penalty and a year imprisonment for criminal, and over $1 million for civil. And then if you misrepresent this director ID, there is the same penalty. Again, don't need to stress about it because it really does take 5 minutes, but it is important to know that this is serious and there are penalties associated with it. So what are the steps? We've told you what the director ID is. Now we need to tell you what the steps are. The first is to access this link, which Delaney will chuck into the chat, and that is the Director ID apply link. And step one, if you haven't done so already, set up your MyGov ID. Now, it's really important to note that your MyGov ID is not your MyGov account that you access Centrelink and ATO and that sort of thing. It is a business, it's attached to you and your business, and this is where you need to access it from. Then you need to gather some documents. You're going to need your tax file number, your residential address as held with the ATO, and information from 2 documents below to verify your identity, such as bank account details, your ATO notice of assessment, your super account details, or a dividend statement. Once you compile this, you can move on to step 3, which is completing your application. So once you have your MyGov ID, you jump in, you enter in your personal details, and they will ask you for reference numbers on whether it's your ATO notice of assessment or your super account details. And then once that is done, it will literally take a minute for them to say verified and give you your Director ID number. We will be providing a video demonstration of the exact steps of how to do it in the portal to be able to apply, and that will become available in our resources section with this recording around the Director ID. I did it myself, that's me doing the demo, and it literally took me about 3 minutes to do. So it's something that isn't going to take very long as you have the information required. If you are a client of ours and need information around your notice of assessment or anything like that, please contact admin and they will very happily provide you with this information, but you should already have copies of it. You have plenty to choose from in terms of, it doesn't have to be the notice of assessment, it can be a bank account detail, and it can be super details. You get to choose. As you go through the process, it will give you the option to choose which ones you're going to decide to use. So a reminder of the dates. If you are a director and you have been one on or before the 31st of October 2021, you must apply by November this year. If it's between the 1st of November to the 4th of April, it's within 28 days of this appointment, or from the 5th of April, this needs to be done before the company can be set up listing you as a director. And I will also confirm what Michael had said previously, which is even if you are already an existing director of a company and you're setting up a new company, you need to make sure that this Director ID is done before then. We actually cannot do this without the Director ID for any new companies going forward from the 5th of April. The other thing that I must state is that we cannot, so no accountant or anyone can do this on your behalf because it is verifying your identity. As much as we'd love to be able to help you, it's a requirement that you need to jump on that link, which is in the chat, and I'll get Delaney to put it in again in case anyone's missed it. It takes 5 minutes and you'll be able to apply for that. And then that Director ID can be used for any company already established or going forward. All right, any questions? I'm going to stop the share and see if we have any questions from anyone, or are we all good? I know it's a lot of information. Feel free to unmute and ask any questions or pop it in the chat. What if the company...
I have a question. Can
Sure.
I ask a question?
Yeah.
Obviously, the middle deadlines it says 28 days from appointment. Some of those dates have already passed.
Yes.
So is there some lenience around getting them caught up now, kind of thing for people?
You should do it immediately.
Yeah,
As long as, as long as you've been a director between those dates, you've got about 28 days.
Yep.
So if you haven't done it now, then I would put that at the top of your list and get it done.
What if the company's being wound up? If it's being wound up prior to November, probably no point. But if it's going to still be active post-November, you may need to apply for one. This question was also raised with ASIC and various bodies in previous webinars. And look, they're umming and ahhing about basically saying, well, there's no point because the company's going to be shut down. And if you don't intend on being a director of another company, probably no point. But I'd say if it's going to be wound up post-November, still do it. If prior, then don't bother.
I would also note that there's no harm in having a Director ID, even if you then don't go on to be a director of another company. You've got it set up.
It's like a
That's 5
tax line
minutes.
number. It just stays with you forever,
Yeah.
sort of thing.
Once you have it, set and forget.
Yeah.
Any other questions? No? Does this seem easy and doable? It really, as long as you have the information on your documents or your super account or your bank accounts, and the important thing is that it matches what the ATO has as well, then it will take you 3 minutes to do.
Like Laura said, if you're having issues with specific info, just contact our office and we can supply it very quickly for you. Not a problem.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you everyone for being here. This recording will go up and an email will be sent out and will be on our resources section together with a video demonstration of how to do it in the next 48 hours. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out and we'd be really happy to assist. Thank you everyone and have a great day.
Thank you.